Picture this. You're on the biggest ship in the world, the most beautiful ship that ever existed. Everyone keeps saying this ship is impossible to sink, literally impossible. And you believe it, because just looking at it, you'd believe it too. But then, 4 days after leaving the port, it's gone. Really gone. It went straight to the bottom of the ocean. With more than one famous or unknown, everyone on the same ship. And in 4 days, everyone in the same ocean. Here's the part that makes everyone's jaw drop. Before the Titanic hit the iceberg, it received 7 warnings. 7. From other ships on the radio saying, "Watch out, there's ice ahead of you." 7 warnings. And you know what the captain did? Kept going. Same speed. Didn't slow down at all. Why? Well, the owner of the company that built the ship, a man named Bruce Ismay, was actually on board, and he wanted to arrive in New York earlier than planned. Make the news, get his name in the papers. Some say he pressured the captain to go faster. The captain had 38 years of experience. He'd never had a serious accident. He probably thought everything was fine. It wasn't. On the night of April 14th, a lookout at the front of the ship stared out at the horizon and saw something dark in the water. He grabbed the phone with a shaking hand and said the words that would change everything. "Iceberg, right ahead. Iceberg, right there." The sailor tried to turn the ship, but think about it. Can you turn a 270-meter ship real quick? No, you can't. It was too big, too fast. The iceberg was too close. The ship turned slightly, but not enough. The iceberg scraped along the right side of the hull for about 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds of contact. But in those 10 seconds, the steel hull cracked open in several places. Water started rushing in. The ship's designer, a man named Thomas Andrews who was actually on board, went down to inspect the damage. When he came back, his face was white. He pulled the captain aside and said quietly, "The ship is going to sink." The captain didn't believe it. Andrews looked him in the eye and said, "Less than 2 hours. 2 hours." Now here's the part that makes everyone angry when they find 500 people on board. And you know what's the craziest part? The real story is way more insane than any movie. This is the Titanic, and I'm going to tell you everything. Okay, find out. The Titanic had 20 lifeboats. Sounds like a lot, right? But those 20 lifeboats together could only carry 178 people, and there were 224 people on board. Do the math. Even if every single lifeboat left completely full, over 1,000 people would still have nowhere to go. But then it gets even worse. Most lifeboats left less than half full. Because people didn't actually believe the ship was really going to sink. It seemed too crazy to be true. One lifeboat that could hold 65 people left with 12. 12 people. In a boat for 65. And why were there so few lifeboats? Because the owner thought they made the deck look ugly. Ugly. That decision cost hundreds of lives. At 2:20 in the morning, less than 3 hours after hitting the iceberg, the Titanic was gone. In the final minutes, the ship broke in two. The front went down first. The back end stayed pointing at the sky for a moment, and then went down too. Hundreds of people ended up in the ocean. The water was minus 2 degrees Celsius. That's colder than your freezer. In water that cold, a human body can survive between 15 and 45 minutes before it stops working. The people in the lifeboats could hear the screaming from far away, and then, slowly, it went quiet. Of the 224 people on board, around 500 didn't survive. Most didn't drown. They died from the cold, 500 people. Just let that number sit for a second. About 710 people survived. They were the ones who had made it into the lifeboats. They just floated there, in the dark, in the cold. Some didn't even know yet if their family was alive. At around 4 in the morning, a ship called the Carpathia appeared on the horizon. It had received the Titanic's distress signal and came at full speed, cutting through ice fields in the dark, just to get there in time. The survivors were pulled on board one by one. Some were so frozen they couldn't even climb the ladder. But first, Let me help you understand just how enormous this thing was. The Titanic was 270 meters long. That's almost 3 football fields laid end to end. Let that sink in. It was as tall as a... When the Carpathia arrived in New York a few days later, thousands of people were waiting at the docks, crying, looking for family members. The whole world was in shock. The unsinkable ship had sunk. For 73 years, nobody knew exactly where the Titanic was. Somewhere down there, at the bottom of the ocean. Then, in 1985, a scientist named Robert Ballard used an underwater robot to search the ocean floor, and one day in September, the camera picked up something in the mud at the bottom, a giant boiler, then another, then the entire hull of the Titanic, intact, sitting 800 meters underwater. There it was, exactly as it sank, 73 years later. When the photos appeared around the world, a lot of people cried, because suddenly the story became real in a different way. The ship was real. The people were real. And you know what scientists discovered? That bacteria have been eating away at the metal for decades, and that by around 2030. The Titanic might be completely gone. By 2030. The Titanic changed a lot of things in the world. After the disaster, every ship was required to carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board. Radio had to operate 24 hours a day. Ice patrols started monitoring the North Atlantic. Lives were saved because of what happened that night. But the biggest lesson of the Titanic isn't about lifeboats or ice. It's about what happens when people become so proud of what they've built that they stop listening to the warnings. 7 warnings, ignored. The ocean doesn't care how big your ship is. And maybe we should remember that a little more often. If you want more stories like this one, real stories, told the way they should be told, you already know what to do. 17-story building. It weighed over 52.0 tons, 52,000 tons. And inside, oh my, there was a swimming pool, the very first swimming pool ever built on a ship in history. There was a gym, a fancy restaurant with a menu in French, a Turkish bath, a grand staircase with a crystal chandelier that looked like a palace, 3 years to build, 15,000 workers, and when it was finished, everyone said the same thing. This ship cannot sink. Spoiler, yes, it can. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic left Southampton, England, heading to New York. And on board, there were 224 people. But not just any kind of people, every kind of people. Up in first class, there were the super rich. One guy named John Jacob Astor was one of the wealthiest men in the entire world. In today's money, he had around $2 billion. He was there, on vacation, on the ship. But down below in third class, the story was very different. There were hundreds of immigrant families, people from Ireland, Sweden, Italy, who had sold everything they owned just to buy a third-class ticket. They were going to America to start a new life, rich or poor.